She thought her marriage was built on loyalty, until the maid's pregnancy exposed a betrayal growing inside her own home. When her husband shows no remorse for the affair or the child he fathered, her heartbreak turns into unshakable resolve. While he drowns in the consequences of his choices, she discovers a love rooted in respect and peace. Welcome to True Love Stories. Please subscribe and leave a like for us. It means a lot to us. Also share this video. Now let's dive into the story. Tasha had always believed that betrayal was something loud, explosive, obvious. She never imagined it would arrive quietly, disguised as routine. For 6 years, her marriage to Jamie had been the kind others envied. They hosted dinner parties in their polished suburban home, vacationed in places that looked beautiful in photographs, and smiled easily in public. Jamie was successful, composed, charming in a way that reassured everyone around him. Tasha had built her life around that stability. She managed the home, handled social obligations, and supported his growing business. Together, they were a polished image of success. But images, she would later learn, could be carefully staged illusions. The first change was subtle. Jamie began coming home later than usual. At first, he blamed expanding contracts and demanding clients. Tasha didn't question it. Success required sacrifice. She warmed his dinners twice, sometimes 3 times, before finally wrapping them in foil and placing them in the refrigerator. When he did return, he smelled faintly of cologne that wasn't his usual brand. When she mentioned it once, lightly, he dismissed her with a laugh and said she was imagining things. Then came the distance. Jamie had once shared everything: office gossip, frustrations, even silly inconveniences. Now conversations became functional. How was your day? Fine. Did you pay the electricity bill? Yes. He spent more time on his phone, angling the screen away from her. Passwords appeared where none had existed before. If she entered the room unexpectedly, he would lower the device too quickly, his expression tightening for a split second before smoothing over. Tasha told herself she was overthinking. Marriage had seasons. This was just a difficult one. Around that time, Clara entered their lives. She was 24, soft-spoken, and grateful for the live-in maid position. She claimed she needed the job to support her sick mother back home. Tasha felt protective toward her, often reminding Jamie to treat her kindly. Clara worked diligently, cleaning early, cooking neatly, avoiding unnecessary conversation. She seemed almost invisible in the household, moving quietly from room to room. Perhaps that was why the shift went unnoticed at first. Tasha began observing strange coincidences. Clara would flush slightly when Jamie addressed her. Jamie, who normally ignored household staff beyond polite acknowledgement, suddenly had instructions for her: how to arrange his study, how to iron his shirts properly, how to prepare his coffee. Tasha caught him watching Clara once in the kitchen, his gaze lingering a second too long. When she asked what he needed, he startled slightly before replying, "Nothing." Still, Tasha silenced her unease. She refused to become the suspicious wife. The undeniable sign came 3 months later. Clara started moving slower. She complained of nausea. Some mornings, she rushed to the bathroom before finishing her cleaning duties. Tasha initially worried she was ill and suggested seeing a doctor. Clara resisted at first, her hands trembling when Tasha insisted. Finally, she went. When she returned, her face was pale and strained. She asked to speak privately with Tasha, but then seemed to lose her courage. Instead, she muttered that she needed a few days of rest. It was Jamie's reaction that unsettled Tasha most. When Tasha mentioned Clara might be unwell, Jamie's jaw tightened. "That's not our problem," he said too sharply. "If she can't work, we'll replace her." The coldness startled her. He had never been that dismissive before. When she looked at him carefully, she saw something else beneath the irritation: fear. 2 weeks later, the truth slipped out in fragments. Tasha found prenatal vitamins hidden behind folded towels in the laundry cabinet. She held the bottle in her hands for a long time, staring at the label as her heartbeat quickened. When she confronted Clara gently, the young woman burst into tears. Through broken sobs, she admitted she was pregnant. Tasha felt sympathy before suspicion. "Where is the father?" she asked softly. Clara hesitated. Her eyes darted toward the hallway leading to Jamie's study. That single glance changed everything. Tasha's stomach dropped. It was a small movement, almost unnoticeable, but it was enough. The air felt heavier, thicker. Her mind began assembling every strange moment of the past few months like pieces of a puzzle she had refused to solve. That evening, when Jamie came home, Tasha watched him differently. She noticed how Clara avoided his gaze at dinner. She noticed how Jamie barely touched his food. The silence between them was louder than any confession. Tasha said nothing. Not yet. Instead, she lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling beside a man who suddenly felt like a stranger. Her heart ached not from proof, but from intuition. She sensed that something irreversible had already happened inside her marriage. For the first time in 6 years, she felt alone in her own bed. The cracks were no longer invisible. They were spreading. Tasha did not confront Jamie immediately. She needed certainty, not suspicion. The glance Clara had given toward his study replayed in her mind endlessly, but she refused to accuse without proof. If her world was about to collapse, she wanted it to collapse on solid ground. For days, she observed. Jamie grew increasingly restless. He guarded his phone obsessively, carrying it even to the bathroom. He began stepping outside to take calls, lowering his voice whenever she approached. Clara, meanwhile, avoided eye contact altogether. Her movements were careful, her silence heavier than before. The house felt divided by an invisible line no one acknowledged. One afternoon, while Jamie was at work and Clara had gone to a doctor's appointment, Tasha entered his study. She had cleaned that room countless times over the years, but this time she wasn't there as a wife maintaining order. She was there as a woman searching for truth. His laptop sat open on the desk. For a long moment, she simply stared at it. Her hands trembled as she approached, almost hoping it would be locked. It wasn't. The screen lit up at her touch. She told herself she would only glance. An email notification blinked in the corner. The sender's name made her stomach drop, Clara M. The subject line read, "We need to talk about the baby." The baby. Her breath caught as she opened it. The message was short, anxious. Clara had written about medical bills, about fear, about our child. She asked him what he intended to do, and said she couldn't handle everything alone. Tasha felt the blood drain from her face. Her eyes moved quickly through his inbox. There were bank transfer confirmations labeled vaguely, personal assistance, but the attached notes were clearer. Rent payment, clinic deposit, vitamins. There it was. Not suspicion, not intuition. Proof. For a few seconds, the room felt like it was spinning. She gripped the edge of the desk to steady herself. 6 years of marriage narrowed into a single, suffocating moment. Every late night, every lock screen, every defensive tone. It all aligned perfectly. And still, part of her hoped there was some misunderstanding. That hope died that evening. When Jamie returned home, Tasha was waiting in the living room. The lights were dim. Clara had retreated to her quarters early, claiming fatigue. "We need to talk," Tasha said quietly. Jamie paused, sensing something different in her tone. "About what?" She placed the printed email on the coffee table between them. She had printed it deliberately. Something physical. Something undeniable. He stared at the paper. For a split second, panic flickered across his face. Then his expression hardened. "How long?" she asked. Her voice did not rise. That seemed to unsettle him more. He exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. "Tasha!" "How long?" she repeated. "It wasn't planned," he snapped, irritation creeping in. "It just happened." The words sliced through her. "So it's true," she whispered. He didn't deny it. That silence was confirmation enough. Anger rose in her chest, but it was colder than she expected. "She's pregnant, Jamie." "I know," he said flatly. "And it's yours." Another pause. "Yes." The simplicity of his admission stunned her. No collapse into guilt. No desperate apology. Just a tired acknowledgement. as if he were confessing to a minor inconvenience. Tasha stared at him, searching his face for remorse. How could you do this? In our home? He scoffed lightly. Don't make it dramatic. Dramatic? Her voice cracked for the first time. You slept with our employee. You got her pregnant. In the house I run. And you think I'm being dramatic? He stood up abruptly. You've been distant for years, Tasha. Always busy with appearances, events, everything except us. She blinked, stunned. So this is my fault? I'm not saying that, he muttered, though his tone suggested otherwise. Things weren't good between us. Then you talk to me, she said. You don't betray me. He looked away. It was a mistake. A mistake happens once, she replied. A pregnancy doesn't. The words hung between them. For a moment, something almost like shame crossed his face. But it faded quickly, replaced by calculation. We can handle this privately, he said. I'll support the child. Clara won't cause problems. There's no need for this to destroy everything. Everything. As if their marriage were a business contract facing minor damage control. Tasha felt something inside her shift permanently. Does she think you'll leave me? He hesitated again. That hesitation was answer enough. Later that night, Tasha asked Clara to join them in the living room. The young woman entered trembling, her hands clasped protectively over her stomach. Tell me the truth, Tasha said gently. All of it. Tears streamed down Clara's face. She admitted the affair had lasted months. She said Jamie promised to take care of her. She said she thought he loved her. She confessed she believed he might leave his wife eventually. Jamie interrupted sharply. Don't twist things. Clara flinched. You said you were unhappy. Tasha closed her eyes briefly. That hurt more than anything. Not the betrayal alone, but the private narrative he had built about their marriage to justify it. When she opened her eyes, she looked at her husband as though seeing him for the first time. This was not the man she had defended for years. This was someone capable of deception without visible guilt. Are you sorry? She asked him quietly. He hesitated too long. I'm sorry it happened this way, he finally said. Not sorry for hurting her. Not sorry for the betrayal. Sorry for inconvenience. That was the moment Tasha understood something clearly. The affair was not the deepest wound. His lack of remorse was. Something within her hardened completely. The pleading wife inside her disappeared. In her place stood a woman who suddenly saw her marriage without illusion. I won't stay in a house where I am disrespected, she said calmly. Jamie's expression shifted, as if he had not expected consequences so immediate. Don't overreact. I'm not, she replied. I'm done. That night, she moved into the guest bedroom. She did not cry loudly. She did not scream. Instead, she lay awake in silence, staring at the unfamiliar ceiling. 6 years ended not with a storm, but with clarity. Behind closed doors, truth had finally spoken. And it had changed everything. The morning after the confrontation, the house felt like a battlefield after the smoke had cleared. Nothing was broken, yet everything was ruined. Tasha moved through the kitchen calmly, preparing coffee as she always did, but her movements were deliberate now, measured, detached. Jamie watched her cautiously from across the counter, as if unsure which version of his wife stood before him. He expected tears, anger, begging. Instead, he received silence. 3 days later, Tasha met with a lawyer. She did not tell Jamie beforehand. She simply scheduled the appointment, gathered financial documents, and walked into the law office with her head high. As the attorney reviewed bank statements and property deeds, Tasha realized how much of her life she had entrusted blindly to her husband. Joint accounts, shared investments, assets registered primarily under his name. But she had rights, and she intended to protect them. When Jamie was served with divorce papers, his confidence cracked for the first time. You're actually doing this? He demanded, storming into the guest room where Tasha had been staying. Yes. Over one mistake? She looked at him steadily. It wasn't one mistake. It was months of lies. It was a child. And it was your refusal to feel any remorse. He ran a frustrated hand through his hair. Think about what this will do to our reputation. There's no R anymore, she replied quietly. At first, he tried persuasion. He sent flowers to the guest room. He suggested counseling. He promised financial security, discretion, a fresh start. But every offer sounded like a business proposal, not repentance. When persuasion failed, manipulation followed. You'll regret this, he warned one evening. Do you think it's easy starting over at your age? The insult stung, but it also strengthened her resolve. I would rather start over alone than stay somewhere I am unwanted. Meanwhile, Clara's presence in the house became unbearable. She avoided Tasha completely now, guilt written across her face. The tension suffocated every shared space. Within weeks, Jamie arranged an apartment for her across town. He claimed it was to reduce complications, but Tasha knew it was also to protect his image. The day Clara moved out, Tasha watched from an upstairs window. The young woman looked smaller somehow, her hand resting protectively over her growing stomach. For a fleeting second, Tasha felt pity. Clara had believed promises whispered in secrecy. She had mistaken attention for love. But pity did not erase betrayal. The divorce proceedings moved swiftly, but not peacefully. Lawyers exchanged sharp letters. Financial disclosures revealed more hidden transfers than Tasha expected. Each discovery was another quiet cut. Friends began to notice the separation. Some reached out with genuine concern. Others pried for details disguised as sympathy. A few suggested forgiveness, insisting that men make mistakes. Tasha listened politely but stood firm. She refused to shrink her pain to make others comfortable. Jamie's public image began to crack subtly. Rumors circulated, first quietly among close circles, then more openly. He denied everything publicly, presenting the divorce as a mutual decision. But whispers have a way of finding truth. As months passed, the legal battles intensified. Jamie grew increasingly irritable. The confident businessman who once controlled every situation now seemed perpetually on edge. Meetings ran long. Calls from Clara became frequent. Because Clara was no longer silent. Pregnancy changed her expectations. She no longer wanted secrecy. She wanted security, assurance, a future. She called Jamie late at night, demanding to know where their relationship stood. She asked if he would acknowledge the baby publicly. She questioned why he hadn't left his wife sooner. Arguments echoed through his phone speaker more often than Tasha would have imagined. Jamie had wanted excitement without consequence. Instead, he found obligation. One afternoon, during a particularly tense legal negotiation, Jamie accused Tasha of trying to ruin him financially. "You're being vindictive," he said coldly across the conference table. She met his gaze evenly. "I'm being fair." And she was. She asked for what she was entitled to, no more, no less. The house would be sold. Assets divided. She would walk away with stability, not dependence. The final hearing was brief but heavy. When the judge declared the marriage legally dissolved, Tasha felt neither triumph nor devastation. She felt release. Outside the courthouse, Jamie tried once more. "We don't have to be enemies." She studied him carefully. For the first time, she saw not power, but fear. His life was no longer neatly controlled. A child was coming. Financial obligations were multiplying. His reputation was fragile. "I don't hate you," she said calmly, "but I don't trust you. And without trust, there is nothing left." She walked away without looking back. In the months that followed, the contrast between their lives grew sharper. Tasha moved into a smaller but elegant apartment across town. It was quiet, peaceful. She chose every piece of furniture herself. For the first time in years, her home reflected only her taste. Jamie, meanwhile, found that life with Clara was nothing like stolen moments in secret rooms. She was emotional, often insecure, frequently demanding reassurance. She wanted more than financial support. She wanted legitimacy. He had promised her a future. Now she expected it. The baby's due date approached, and with it came mounting pressure. Medical expenses increased. Clara insisted on regular visits. She spoke openly about their child deserving a real family. Jamie felt trapped between scandal and responsibility. One evening, after a heated phone argument with Clara about public acknowledgement, he sat alone in the very living room where Tasha had once confronted him. The silence felt different now, hollow. He realized too late that peace had never been accidental. Tasha had created it, and now she was gone. The divorce had freed her, but it had begun to unravel him. For the first time, Jamie experienced the weight of consequence, and it was heavier than he expected. The silence in Tasha's new apartment was unfamiliar at first. It didn't echo with tension or unspoken words. It simply existed, soft, neutral, waiting to be shaped. The first few nights felt strange. She would wake up instinctively, expecting to hear Jamie's late footsteps or the vibration of his phone on a bedside table that was no longer there. But gradually, the silence became peaceful. She painted the walls a soft cream he had once dismissed as too plain. She placed fresh flowers on the dining table simply because she liked them. She rearranged furniture without seeking approval. Each small decision restored a piece of her independence. She realized how long she had been adjusting herself to maintain harmony. Now there was no one to adjust for. Healing did not arrive dramatically. It came in ordinary moments: morning coffee on the balcony, long walks in the evening, reconnecting with friends she had neglected during her marriage. Some conversations were awkward at first. People didn't always know what to say to a divorced woman whose husband had fathered a child with their maid. But Tasha refused to let shame attach itself to her story. It was his betrayal, not her failure. She began attending a weekend art class she had once postponed because Jamie thought it was impractical. There, surrounded by strangers with paint-stained hands and unfiltered laughter, she felt something awaken inside her. Creativity. Lightness. A version of herself untouched by marriage. It was in that class that she first met Daniel. He wasn't loud or overly charming. He carried a quiet steadiness about him. A widower, she later learned, raising a 10-year-old son named Lucas. The first time they spoke, it was over a misplaced paintbrush. The conversation was simple, polite, but unlike the strained exchanges she had grown used to, it felt easy. Daniel listened when she spoke. Not distractedly. Not impatiently. He asked thoughtful questions and seemed genuinely interested in her answers. There was no rush in him, no need to impress. Over the next few weeks, their conversations grew longer. They spoke about art, about travel, about grief. Daniel shared the story of losing his wife to illness 3 years earlier. He spoke of her with respect, not avoidance. Tasha admired that. There was no bitterness in him, only acceptance. One afternoon, as they walked out of class together, he said gently, "Would you like to have coffee sometime? Outside of paint fumes." She smiled before she could stop herself. "I'd like that." Coffee turned into dinner. Dinner turned into long evening walks. Daniel never pushed for details about her divorce, but when she chose to tell him, he didn't flinch. He didn't judge. He simply said, "You deserved better." The words settled deeply inside her. With Daniel, she did not feel like she had to prove her worth. There were no subtle criticisms, no comparisons, no dismissals of her feelings. When she spoke, he respected her perspective. When she hesitated, he noticed. The first time she met Lucas, she was nervous. But the boy greeted her shyly, clutching a sketchbook filled with drawings. "Dad says you're good at painting," he said. She laughed softly. "Your dad exaggerates." Lucas smiled, and in that moment, Tasha felt something fragile but beautiful forming, a possibility she hadn't allowed herself to imagine. Meanwhile, Jamie's life was growing increasingly chaotic. Clara had given birth to a baby boy. The arrival of the child brought not peace but pressure. Sleepless nights magnified Clara's insecurities. She demanded that Jamie spend more time at the apartment. She grew resentful when he prioritized work. Arguments became frequent, sharp, exhausting. "You said you loved me," she accused one night. "I said I cared about you," he corrected, frustration clear in his voice. The distinction cut deeply. Clara wanted legitimacy. She wanted public acknowledgement, promises of marriage, a future that mirrored the one she had watched Tasha live. But Jamie hesitated. Commitment now felt like confinement. The secrecy that once thrilled him had transformed into obligation he resented. Their home was no longer filled with flirtation and stolen excitement. It was filled with crying, bills, and unresolved expectations. While his life tightened, Tasha's expanded. Months passed, and her laughter returned more naturally. She found herself looking forward to Daniel's calls, to Lucas's school art exhibitions, to simple dinners where conversation flowed without defensiveness. One evening, as she and Daniel sat on her balcony watching the city lights, he reached for her hand gently, as though asking permission. She didn't pull away. "I don't want to rush you," he said quietly. "I know you've been hurt." She met his eyes. "You're not rushing me." In that moment, she realized something profound. Love did not have to feel like tension. It could feel like safety. For the first time in years, her heart did not brace itself. Across town, Jamie sat in a dim apartment listening to Clara's frustrated complaints about finances and sleepless nights. The baby cried in the background. His phone buzzed with missed work calls. His carefully constructed life felt unstable, unpredictable. He thought of Tasha then, not with anger, but with an unfamiliar ache. He remembered how organized their home had been, how calm evenings once felt. He had mistaken stability for boredom. Now he understood its value. But understanding arrived too late. Tasha, once shattered by betrayal, was slowly building something stronger. Not just a relationship, but a new sense of self. She was no longer defined by marriage or scandal or loss. She was defined by her resilience. And in Daniel's steady presence, she discovered that love, when genuine, did not demand sacrifice of dignity. It honored it. The day Jamie saw Tasha again, she was standing outside a bookstore, sunlight catching the softness of her smile. Daniel stood beside her, one hand resting gently at the small of her back. Lucas was animatedly explaining something, waving a newly purchased novel in the air. Tasha laughed, openly, freely, without restraint. Jamie had not heard that sound in a long time. He had not realized how much he missed it. He had been walking out of a nearby cafe after a tense meeting with his accountant. Child support calculations, medical expenses, adjustments to financial agreements. The numbers seemed endless. Clara had recently hired her own lawyer to ensure proper arrangements for their son. She no longer trusted verbal promises. Their relationship had deteriorated beyond repair. Clara had imagined a romantic rescue story. Instead, she found herself in a small apartment with a man who was present physically but distant emotionally. Jamie fulfilled his financial responsibilities, but warmth was absent. Resentment filled the space where affection once lived. "You don't even look at me the way you used to," she accused him one night, rocking the baby in her arms. "Things are different now," he replied flatly. The truth was harsher. The fantasy had expired. The stolen moments that once felt thrilling now seemed reckless. The secrecy that once bonded them now suffocated them. Clara grew increasingly frustrated, threatening to tell her story publicly if she felt ignored. She wanted recognition, not to remain hidden as a shameful chapter. And so whispers began spreading more openly. Business associates started treating Jamie cautiously. Invitations to exclusive events slowed. His polished reputation, once untouchable, had small but visible fractures. People smiled to his face, but conversations shifted when he entered rooms. Consequence rarely arrives dramatically. It seeps in, quietly altering perception. Standing across the street from the bookstore, watching Tasha's easy happiness, Jamie felt something he had not allowed himself to feel before: regret without defense. He had told himself she was distant, that their marriage had grown dull, that he deserved excitement. But now, seeing her radiant in a way she had not been for years, he recognized something uncomfortable. She had not been the problem. He had. Tasha noticed him then. Their eyes met briefly. Time seemed to pause, suspended between past and present. For a fraction of a second, old memories flickered. 6 years of shared history, vacations, laughter, dreams once spoken sincerely. But instead of pain, Tasha felt calm. She squeezed Daniel's hand lightly, not out of fear, but reassurance. Daniel followed her gaze and saw Jamie. He did not react with jealousy or tension. He simply stood steady beside her. Jamie crossed the street slowly. "Tasha," he said, his voice lacking its former confidence. "Jamie," she replied politely. There was no hostility in her tone, only distance. He glanced at Daniel, who extended a courteous nod. Lucas studied Jamie with curious innocence. "You look well," Jamie said awkwardly. "I am," Tasha answered honestly. The simplicity of that statement carried more weight than accusation ever could. He hesitated, then spoke more quietly. "I wanted to say, I should have handled things differently." It wasn't a full apology. It lacked the depth of true accountability. But it was the closest he had come. Tasha studied him carefully. She saw the lines of stress on his face, the fatigue in his posture, the subtle unraveling of the man who once believed himself untouchable. "I hope you find peace, Jamie," she said gently. "Not I forgive you. Not I miss you. Just a sincere wish, free of bitterness." Because she no longer carried anger. She had set it down months ago. After a brief, uncomfortable pause, Jamie nodded and stepped back. He watched as she walked away with Daniel and Lucas, their figures blending into the afternoon crowd. For the first time, he fully understood what he had lost. Not just a wife, but stability, loyalty, partnership, respect. Back at Clara's apartment later that evening, the baby cried relentlessly. Clara was exhausted, her patience thin. Bills lay stacked on the kitchen table. She looked at Jamie with frustration that bordered on resentment. "This isn't what you promised," she said bitterly. He had no defense left. In chasing desire, he had created chaos. In avoiding responsibility, he had multiplied it. The life he now lived was built on impulse, not integrity. And it showed. Months passed. Legal agreements settled into routine obligations. Co-parenting remained tense but functional. Jamie adapted outwardly, but the weight of his choices never fully lifted. Meanwhile, Tasha's life flourished quietly. Her relationship with Daniel deepened, not in dramatic declarations, but in consistency, in shared responsibilities, in mutual respect. Lucas began calling her when he needed advice about school projects. Daniel included her in long-term plans without hesitation. One evening, as they prepared dinner together, Daniel wrapped his arms around her gently and said, "I'm grateful you walked into that art class." She smiled. "So am I." Tasha had once believed her life ended the night she discovered the affair. In truth, it had begun again. Betrayal had broken her marriage, but it had also revealed her strength. It forced her to choose dignity over comfort, self-respect over familiarity. Jamie remained bound to the consequences of his choices. Clara, once convinced she had won something, realized she had stepped into instability instead. And Tasha? She moved forward, lighter, wiser, and no longer afraid of silence. Because now her peace was earned, and no one could take it from her again. Finally, we have come to the end of the story. I hope you enjoyed it. Please leave a like and subscribe to my YouTube channel for more intriguing stories.